Are you about to drop serious cash on a new camera in 2026? Hold that decision. Many cameras being praised as must-haves are actually massive disappointments, like the $7,500 flagship that overheats during wedding ceremonies, or the viral compact camera that costs $5,000 but lacks basic image stabilization. Imagine spending $6,000 on a sports camera, only to discover it has fewer megapixels than your 3-year-old backup body, making every crop look like garbage. This isn't about shaming brands for clicks. This is about saving your money and preventing the soul-crushing regret of realizing you bought the wrong gear. Get ready for a no-holds-barred countdown of the 10 most overrated cameras you should absolutely avoid in 2026, including the camera with a 40-megapixel sensor that somehow produces worse image quality than 24-megapixel competitors, and the $7,000 body where you're literally paying $5,000 extra just for a red logo. By the time we hit number 1, you'll understand exactly which cameras are selling dreams but delivering nightmares. So subscribe now and ring the notification bell to upgrade your knowledge, not just your gear. Let's get into it. Starting at number 10, we have the Canon EOS R8. On paper, this camera looks like the perfect entry point into full-frame photography. You're getting a 24.2-megapixel full-frame sensor, 4K 60 frames per second video recording with 10-bit internal capture, and Canon's dual-pixel CMOS autofocus system with over 1,000 focus points. Add in 6K oversampled 4K footage and full HD 180 frames per second slow motion, and it sounds like a budget miracle at $1,449. But here's where the illusion cracks. The EOS R8 is overrated because it's bait masquerading as value. Canon stripped out in-body image stabilization completely, leaving you at the mercy of shaky hands or expensive stabilized lenses. The electronic viewfinder is straight up terrible, so bad that users complain it feels cheap and frustrating to use. Then there's the buffer issue. Canon promises up to 40 frames per second with the electronic shutter, but in real-world bursts, that buffer chokes faster than you can say action shot. Reviews have exposed white balance inconsistencies and struggles with telephoto performance that make this feel like entry-level frustration instead of entry-level value. Sure, some creators defend it as underrated, but honest photographers will tell you a used Canon R6 will crush this thing in every category that actually matters. The R8 feels cheap exactly where it counts, and that's a problem. Coming in at number 9 is the Sony A7 II, and this one hurts because Sony markets it as the ultimate compact full-frame hybrid. You're looking at a 33-megapixel full-frame Exmor sensor, 7-stop 5-axis in-body stabilization, and 4K 30 frames per second recording at 10-bit full-frame, plus 4K 60 frames per second in Super 35 crop mode. The autofocus system packs 759 phase detection points with artificial intelligence subject recognition, and it shoots 10 frames per second in bursts. At $2,200, it's positioned as the traveler's dream camera. But the reality is far less dreamy. The A7 II is overrated because its so-called pocketable design comes with toy-like ergonomics that make professional shooting feel like a joke. The electronic viewfinder is mediocre at best, and Sony's notorious menu system remains a confusing maze that wastes time when you need to change settings quickly. Battery life drains shockingly fast during all-day shoots, which defeats the purpose of a compact travel camera. Creators have called it boring in the worst way, cramped and undersized compared to the Sony A7 IV, which offers better grip and handling for professionals who need reliability. The A7 II is compact hype that falls apart the moment you actually try to use it for serious street photography or event work. It feels premium until your hands touch it, and that's when the regret sets in. Now, you might think compact cameras are the issue here, but number 8 proves that even full-frame hybrids can spectacularly miss the mark when they forget who they're built for. At number 8, we've got the Panasonic Lumix S5 II, and this one had videographers excited when it dropped. The specs are impressive. A 24.2-megapixel full-frame sensor, 6K 30 frames per second recording at 10-bit 420 for up to 30 minutes. Unlimited 4K 60 frames per second at 10-bit 422, and 120 frames per second slow motion. Panasonic finally added phase detection autofocus with 779 points, and the 5-axis in-body stabilization delivers up to 6.5 stops of correction. At $1,999, it looks like the perfect hybrid camera. But photographers are not impressed. The S5 II is overrated as a heavy photo weakling that prioritizes video at the expense of stills. Photographers complain that images come out over-sharpened with unnatural processing. The autofocus system still glitches in challenging situations despite being Panasonic's first real phase detection attempt. And battery drain during hybrid shooting kills the all-rounder fantasy. The weight and shutter inconsistencies make it frustrating for anyone who shoots more photos than video. And the reality is clear. This is a video-first camera pretending to be balanced. If you need stellar video, it delivers. But if you shoot 50-50 photo and video like most hybrid shooters, you'll feel the imbalance constantly. Even Panasonic fans admit the S5 IIX edges this one out, which raises the question of why you'd buy the lesser model in the first place. But here's where things get interesting. Number 7 is from a brand that's supposed to nail hybrid shooting, yet somehow managed to make their autofocus worse than the previous generation. Let that sink in. Number 7 brings us to the Nikon Z6 III, and this camera was supposed to be Nikon's big hybrid statement. You're getting a 24.5 megapixel partially stacked sensor, 6K 60 frames per second recording in NRAW, 4K 120 frames per second, and Full HD 240 frames per second for insane slow motion. The autofocus has 299 phase detection points with artificial intelligence subject detection for humans, animals, and airplanes. Add in Nikon's Synchro VR system that delivers up to 8 stops of stabilization and 120 frames per second burst shooting in DX crop, and it seems like the ultimate tool for action and video. At $2,499, it's priced to compete. But the execution is deeply flawed. The Z6 III is overrated because it promises hybrid magic, but delivers fatal flaws instead. The autofocus actually hunts worse than the older Z6 II in tricky lighting and complex scenes, which is unacceptable for a newer model. High ISO noise destroys detail faster than expected, making low-light performance disappointing for a 2026 release. Reviews describe it as stuck in purgatory, suffering from overheating during extended action bursts, and lacking a true stack sensor for the speed it claims to offer. At $2,500, the Canon R6 Mark III feels noticeably snappier and more reliable overall. Users say the Z6 III gets unfairly praised when a used Z7 II delivers more resolution and better value without the frustration. Nikon hyped this as a game changer, but it's really just solid with too many compromises. And if you think technical flaws are frustrating, Number 6 will show you what happens when social media hype completely detaches a camera from reality. This one became a cultural phenomenon for all the wrong reasons. Rounding out this first section at number 6 is the Fujifilm X106, and oh boy, this one is controversial. The specs actually look fantastic. A 40.2 megapixel APS-C X-Trans sensor, 6.2K 30 frames per second recording at 10-bit, 4K 60 frames per second oversampled footage, and Full HD 240 frames per second slow motion. You get 425 intelligent hybrid autofocus points with artificial intelligence subject detection, 6-stop 5-axis in-body stabilization, and 20 frames per second burst shooting. At $1,799, it's positioned as the ultimate retro-styled compact for street photographers and travel creators. But the hype has completely run away from reality. The X106 is overrated as an influencer accessory that became a status symbol instead of a serious tool. The viral rangefinder aesthetic drove resale prices into absolute madness, but image quality, detail rendering, and dynamic range actually fall behind the Leica GR3 when tested side by side. The autofocus is loud and slow compared to modern standards, and video overheating kicks in embarrassingly fast for a 2026 camera. Users vent that it's just the X105 version 2 with minimal upgrades, losing the soul that made the series special in the first place, all while cheap button quality and a tiny battery frustrate real-world use. It's undeniably fun for casual snapshots and looks gorgeous on Instagram. But the fad pricing and quirky limitations make this more about status than substance. If you're patient, wait for the hype to die and prices to drop, because right now you're paying for popularity, not performance. And that's just the first 5 cameras on our list. If you think these are bad, trust me, things only get worse as we climb higher. Stick around because the mid-tier misfires coming up next will make you question some very expensive decisions. We're now entering premium territory where cameras cost as much as used cars, and the expectations should match. But number 5 is about to prove that expensive doesn't always mean essential, or even sensible. At number 5, we're entering dangerous territory with the Sony A1 II, a camera that tries to revive a format most people forgot existed. Sony brings back the fixed-lens full-frame compact with a massive 61-megapixel Exmor sensor, 4K 30 frames per second recording at 10-bit 422 up to 300 megabits per second, Full HD 120 frames per second slow motion, and S-Log3 with over 15 stops of dynamic range. The autofocus system includes 693 phase detection points with real-time tracking and artificial intelligence subject recognition for humans, animals, birds, insects, and vehicles. It's paired with a Zeiss Sonnar 35mm f2 lens, and Sony clearly wants this to be a premium street photography tool for purists. The price? $4,999. And that's where the wheels fall off. The RX1R3 is overrated as outrageous nostalgia that packages 2012 technology in an expensive shell without learning anything from the past decade. There's no in-body image stabilization whatsoever, no tilting screen for low or high angles, and no weather sealing despite the premium price tag. Creators see this as a slap in the face, questioning why Sony stripped essential features while pushing people toward the A7 series instead. Reviews are baffled by the price hike over far more capable compacts from other brands. Sure, it's incredibly sharp for purists who love fixed lens shooting, but the limitations and cost make it completely irrelevant for most photographers in 2026. This feels less like a camera and more like a marketing ploy to test how much brand loyalty can override common sense. Think Sony's pricing was aggressive? Number 4 takes luxury pricing to an entirely different dimension. We're talking about a camera that costs more than some people's entire camera kits, yet locks you into creative handcuffs you can never escape. Number 4 brings us to the Leica Q3 43. And if you thought $5,000 was steep, prepare yourself for something far worse. This camera features a 60-megapixel full-frame backside illuminated sensor, DCI 8K 30, frames per second recording at 10-bit 420, UHD 4K 60 frames per second at 10-bit 422, Full HD 120 frames per second, and ProRes 422 HQ support. The hybrid autofocus combines phase detection, contrast, and depth from defocus with subject recognition for eyes, faces, and animals. You get optical image stabilization in the fixed 43mm lens, 15 frames per second burst shooting, and Leica's triple-resolution technology that lets you shoot at 60, 36, or 18 megapixels. At $62,995, it's marketed as the ultimate luxury compact for discerning photographers. But luxury doesn't equal practical. The Q343 is overrated for locking you into a single focal length that kills versatility in a world where adaptability matters. That fixed 43mm lens means you're stuck with one perspective, and if that's not your shooting style, you just wasted over $6,000. The autofocus performance is poor compared to competitors, startup times drag past 5 seconds regularly, and the lack of a backup card slot screams unreliability for professional work. Reviews call it questionable, citing shutter lag and ergonomics that frustrate street shooters who need speed and discretion. The files come out overly contrasty and require heavy editing to look natural. Don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful camera to carry around and feels premium in your hands, but photographers will tell you the focal length trap and absurd price make this a luxury regret. It's better for posing with at coffee shops than actually using in the field, and at this price point, that's unacceptable. Now we've reached the point where things get uncomfortable, Because number 3 is a flagship from one of the most trusted names in professional photography. When a camera this expensive and this specialized still disappoints, you know we're deep in overrated territory. Now we're at number 3, and this is where things get really uncomfortable because we're talking about the Canon EOS R1, a flagship camera that costs $6,299 and promises to be the ultimate tool for professionals. The specs are genuinely impressive. A 24.2 megapixel full-frame stacked backside illuminated sensor, 6K 60 frames per second RAW recording internally, 4K 120 frames per second at 10-bit, Canon Log 2 and 3 with HDR PQ and HLG support, and no recording time limits. The dual-pixel intelligent autofocus system has 4,897 focus points with action priority mode designed specifically for sports and eye-control autofocus that tracks where you're looking. 5-axis in-body stabilization delivers up to 8.5 stops of correction, and you can shoot 40 frames per second with the electronic shutter. On paper, this should be the dream camera for action photographers. But the reality is far more complicated. The EOS R1 is overrated as niche bloat designed exclusively for sports shooters, leaving everyone else paying for features they'll never use. That sensor resolution is stuck at just 24.2 megapixels, which users call annoying when you need to crop aggressively for wildlife or distant subjects. The burst rate improvements over the cheaper R5 Mark II are marginal at best, nowhere near enough to justify the price difference for most photographers. Then there's the size and weight issue. This thing is massive and weighs over a kilogram, making it exhausting to carry for anything except dedicated sports assignments. Video specs feel dated for 2026, with no 8K recording without sensor crops, which is embarrassing when cameras half this price offer cleaner wide-angle video. Yes, it's rugged and reliable for Olympics-level action shooting, but for everyday professionals who shoot portraits, events, landscapes, or commercial work, this is expensive overkill. 99% of photographers won't use the specialized features Canon built this camera around, which makes it a premium price for premium regret. Wait for discounts because at launch pricing, this is a hard pass. The top 2 cameras are coming up next, and I'm warning you now. These are the biggest letdowns of 2026. We're talking flagship fails and brand blunders that will make you question everything you thought you knew about premium camera companies. Don't go anywhere. Before I reveal the top 2 most overrated cameras of 2026, I need you to understand something. These aren't budget cameras with minor flaws. These are flagship models from industry giants, cameras that demand premium prices and make massive promises about innovation and performance. But when you actually break down what you're getting for your money, the illusion falls apart fast. Let's start with number 2. The Sony A1 II comes in at $6,499, and Sony markets this as the ultimate speed demon for professional photographers and videographers who need the absolute best. The specs are undeniably impressive. A 50-megapixel full-frame stacked backside illuminated sensor, 8K 30 frames per second recording at 10-bit 420, 4K 120 frames per second at 10-bit 422, ProRes RAW output over HDMI, and Sony's S-Cinetone profile for cinema-style color. The autofocus has 759 phase detection points covering 92% of the sensor with artificial intelligence subject detection for humans, animals, and vehicles. 5-axis in-body stabilization provides up to 8.5 stops of correction, and you can shoot 30 frames per second with the electronic shutter. This should be the dream camera, right? Wrong. The A1 II is overrated at $6,500 because the upgrades from the original A1 are tiny gimmicks that don't justify the cost. Slightly better pre-capture shooting is nice, but it's not revolutionary, and it definitely doesn't warrant dropping another $6,500 when the Sony A9 III crushes the A1 II in video performance without the bloated feature set. Photographers and creators bash this camera as an ego buy for bragging rights, something you purchase to flex on other shooters rather than because you actually need what it offers. Complaints flood in about Sony's menu system remaining a confusing maze, overheating during extended burst shooting sessions, and the hard truth that this camera is complete overkill for most photographers who could save thousands by buying a Sony A7R5 and getting 95% of the performance. In 2026, This feels less like innovation and more like Sony squeezing cash from brand loyalists who refuse to admit cheaper options exist. It's great on paper, sure, but disappointing in your wallet and frustrating in real-world use. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. The #1 most overrated camera of 2026 is the Leica SL3, and this one represents everything wrong with flagship camera marketing in the modern era. At $74,095, Leica positions this as the ultimate professional tool for photographers and videographers who demand the best. The specs sound incredible. A 60-megapixel full-frame backside illuminated sensor, 8K recording with no time limits, C8K and 4K support at 10-bit across all resolutions, Full HD ProRes 422HQ up to 60 frames per second, hybrid autofocus combining phase detection and contrast autofocus with object detection, 5-axis sensor shift in-body stabilization delivering up to 5 stops of correction, and 15 frames per second burst shooting. Leica's legendary build quality and that iconic red dot promise prestige and performance in one package. But here's the brutal truth nobody wants to say out loud. The SL3 is wildly overrated because you're paying $7,500 for a logo more than groundbreaking technology. Cheaper cameras like the Panasonic S1R do almost the exact same job with better portability and cost thousands less, exposing how much of this price tag is pure brand tax. User reviews roast the bulky size and weight that make everyday shooting exhausting, turning what should be a joy into a burden you'll resent carrying. The autofocus improvements feel like small, iterative steps forward instead of the revolutionary leap Leica claims, and overheating kicks in during long video sessions despite the premium build. This camera exists for brand flex, for influencers who want to show off the red dot and feel superior. But real working photographers who care about value over status will tell you straight up, you're paying for the name, not innovation. Unless you're already deep in the Leica cult and money means nothing to you, skip this camera entirely. It's the ultimate example of marketing triumph over substance, and that's why it's the most overrated camera of 2026. So there you have it. The 10 most overrated cameras of 2026, from entry-level disappointments to flagship failures that cost more than some people's cars. The key takeaway here isn't that all cameras are bad or that you shouldn't trust any brands. The real lesson is this: focus on your actual needs, not the marketing hype that floods your social media feed every single day. Be a smart buyer who does research, who reads reviews from multiple sources, who rents before buying when possible, and who questions whether you're buying a tool or buying into a trend. Don't let influencers convince you that you need the latest flagship when a 2-year-old model does everything you actually need for half the price. Don't fall for brand loyalty when better options exist. And definitely don't let FOMO push you into regret. Now it's your turn. Drop a comment below and tell me which cameras you think are overrated in 2026. Did I miss any? Do you disagree with my picks? Let's have an honest conversation about what's actually worth your money in today's camera market. And if you want to balance this out with some hope, check out my video on top 10 rumored cameras for 2026 coming to your screen right now. Let's find you a camera you'll actually love instead of one you'll regret. I'll see you in the next one.